Leaders, good morning. Leaders, good morning. That's more like it. Welcome to a conversation that is themed Leadership in the Face of Adversity. My name is Nozipho Mbanjwa. I am a journalist with CNBC Africa, and it's a great pleasure for me to introduce our panelists who are going to be leaning into this conversation, sharing some of their insights and sharing their own experience of what leading through adversity means for them. Sitting directly close to me is Mama Machel. And as we all know, she is an African leader of note. She's an African stateswoman. We know that she's an international advocate for women and children's rights. She sits on the United Nations Secretary General's SDG Council and works in advocating for the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you, Mama, for being here this morning.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And of course, sitting next to Mama is Prof. Thulisile Madonsela. Many of us in the audience and across the continent know that Prof. Madonsela took on the role of South Africa's public protector between 2009 and 2014. And those of us who are also au fait with our history know that she was one of the people who were instrumental in drafting the constitution that led to a democratic South Africa. Prof, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
And finally, at the end, we have the Honorable Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry in Botswana, Minister Kenewendo. We know that, of course, she is the youngest member of Parliament. She's also the youngest woman in the history of Parliament in Botswana, and previously worked at Trade and Industry Ministry in Ghana. So a true African. Thank you very much for being here. All right, so let's get into it. And before we get to our panel discussion, leaders, this is your conversation. We are your guests, and we're leaning into your conversation. And so when I come to you for a facilitated question and answer session, I really want you to lean in. I really want you to ask those incisive questions. The one thing that I will ask of you, though, I'm going to ask you to be short, to be sharp, and to be to the point. I want to get as many of your voices in. And so I will also exercise my moderator superpowers if I feel that you're not being short, sharp, and to the point, and I will cut you, right? But let's hope that we don't have to get there. So, Mama, let me come to you first. You have served the continent. You have led the continent in different ways. But surely there have been critical moments in your leadership journey where you've had to confront and face adversity. Can you give us an example of one of those experiences? And how did you get through that adversity?
Thank you and good morning. I was 29 when I was given the portfolio of education as a cabinet minister. Young, unexperienced. I was the only woman in the cabinet, and I had to navigate to help our country really to transform the educational system. If you like, it was to draft it anew, from colonial situation to an education system which would serve Mozambique for Mozambicans. I was very enthusiastic, and I put together a team of much qualified and experienced people than myself, and all of them were older than myself. And I learned to listen, to ask questions, and to learn to ask the right questions and listen, but at the end, aware that the decisions are in my shoulders, and I'm responsible for whatever we are going to do together. We had the first 5 years were really great. The country was growing, the education system was growing, we trained teachers, and I was full of enthusiasm and hope. Then Mozambique is confronted with a war, an internal conflict. I saw schools which we had built together being destroyed, more depressed distressing. Kids I knew, I had to find them in displaced camps, in refugee camps actually. Looking at me, gazed, they couldn't almost recognize me. They were so traumatized. And I said to myself, what do we do now?
Yeah.
That was really my first bath of facing adversity. I needed to continue to be Minister of Education in a situation where the system, the network system was being destroyed. But we were left with the most important elements of the education system. It was teachers and the pupils. So in refugee camps, in displaced camps, in other areas where the war had not impacted, we continued now to revisit how do you build a system in a conflict situation. Why this is important? Because our continent is still confronted with this. It's not an experience of the 70s, the late 70s. It's still a reality of our continent. As you know, leaders, most of the children who are not in schools today are in conflict countries or in fragile countries. So it's an issue which is real, it's still present in our reality today. But this is what shaped me, actually. When they introduced me to say, I'm an advocate for children and women, it's not because I chose to. It's because the suffering and the pain of the children and the mothers I had to deal with, they chose me to be their voice. And I had no choice really to refuse. And I had to become, the voice of these kids. And more importantly, of education until today. I'm an advocate for education. To be short, this is where I had to, with my colleagues, to redesign from a normal situation to develop education in conflict situations. And we had to retrain our teachers. We had to create a situation where children could become children again so that they can learn. And this experience of Mozambique inspired then the Secretary General of UN to ask me then to lead, which is called in UN family, the Machel study. And it was to transport the experience of Mozambique to a global stage. Not because we had done extremely well, but it was a model which could be perfectioned, it could be then taken to other situations, and that's how we have to shape the agenda of the UN today to deal with children in situation of conflict. For the sake of time, I'll stop there.
Mama, I hear 4 things. You had to re-listen and ask different questions, so there was a relearning that happened. You spoke about having to re-see teachers and pupils as the resource and the backbone that still remained. So there was a repurposing of existing resources. You spoke about rebuilding. And what I'm hearing is that it's not just about rebuilding the infrastructure, but it's also about rebuilding the people. And finally, what I'm also hearing is about redesigning for the new reality. So how do we go back, take stock of where we are, and say, what do we do moving forward? Mama, Prof, advocates, I come to you next. In your time as public protector in South Africa, you received international accolades, local accolades for your work, but I would dare also to say you probably received as many enemies at the same time, right? How would you describe your experience of leading in adversity?
Well, good morning, leaders. Good morning to you, Nozipho. I would like to believe that my experience was shaped by my earlier experience. I joined the struggle at a very young age. I must have been around 16 or so when I started getting involved in the struggle after June 16. So young leaders, you don't want to know how old am I. And the reason I joined the struggle was because I loved justice and I wanted to create a more just and equitable world, a world where every human being feels they belong and everyone's potential is freed. And so that was always the rallying point. When I faced what you define as adversity, as a puppet protector, the anchor of what my team and I did was always, what do we love? Can we still achieve what we love, which was a more just, a more fair world, and a more inclusive world. And everything then hanged on that. We had faith, though, that the people we're dealing with are going to change, because if we didn't have faith that people couldn't change, we wouldn't have proceeded. We also understood that people were doing the best they could, just as we were doing the best we could. And some of the things people were doing was because they didn't understand consequences. A lot of leaders think transactionally. That I need to do this to achieve this now, and they don't realize that if I do this, the consequences will be that. You know, one of the investigations I did, for example, was around a use of resources for one of the senior people in government, enormous resources. But by saying that is okay to do it, you were then sending a message unintentionally that it's okay for all leaders at all levels to use the enormity of resources for themselves at the expense of the people we are supposed to serve. So we had to understand that some of it is unintentional. So we had to, personally, I had to forgive people, because I just understood that if I carried it through, I would not be able to move forward. But lastly, for me, as I indicated, we focused on what we loved. We had faith that people would change. We also had faith that we ourselves can carry the task that we're supposed to carry. We also had hope, honestly, that the South Africa we wanted was possible. And I kept saying we, because I was never a lone crusader. If I had been a lone crusader, I would not have succeeded. But that wisdom came later, because I'd been involved in the struggle before. I'd been a trade unionist. And as a young trade unionist, I often fought everyone, including my colleagues. And at the end of the day, you discover that actually you can go fast when you are alone, but if you want to go far, you need to carry your colleagues with you.
That definitely deserves a round, and of course, you know, that adage, that African adage that, you know, you go fast if you go alone, but you can go so much further when you go with others. But Prof, I think, you know, what you've said resonates so strongly. You've spoken about reconnecting with purpose, and you've centralized justice as the purpose that continue to speak to you and continue to anchor your team. You've spoken about forgiveness. And the way I'm going to pivot this is almost say there's a conversation about courage that needs to take place, because it takes courage to let go of the things that you feel you have a right to fight against, and you have a pain that needs to be acknowledged. But finally, I think we also need to have a conversation as young leaders about how do we transform self-belief so that it is a belief that is embedded in an entire nation, that something different can come from what I am doing. And we're going to explore some of those areas in a moment. But let me go to yourself, Minister Kenewendo. When the news broke that you had been appointed the minister, I believe that every single African that was connected to the news wires in that moment, every single young African celebrated your appointment, because I think it represented so much more than just an appointment of another minister to another portfolio. So what is your experience then as a young African woman in the political arena? What is your experience of leading through adversity?
Thank you very much, Nozipho, and good morning, leaders. You know, it was such an interesting day when I got appointed, and we had a lot of, I received a lot of tweets and messages from across the continent and the world. But what people didn't see was the moment to my appointment, when I was being offered the role of minister. And where, you know, you have a few minutes to yourself. I actually took a picture very randomly. You have a few moments to yourself where you're asking, am I ready for this? Is it the right time for this? Will I be able to deliver on the hopes that will lie on this particular role. And most importantly, it was on the purpose of my life. Is this really what I'm meant to do? And I had to take myself through the various stages of the pivotal moments in my life. And everything in those moments was always about the need to serve. It was always about the need to do better for my country and for the people that I grew up seeing. And just to give you a little background, I'm from a very rural part of Botswana, from Motopi, and seeing the way my village is and the area around that is, it gave me a sense of purpose to want to work for the people in that area and for the younger generation that come after me to know that it's possible, the world is our oyster too, regardless of where you come from. So just to bring it back to your question, adversity for me isn't a moment, it is this life. Because we are faced with a point where we talked about this earlier, where we have to lead a second revolution, if you will, for the continent. And it is all about economic independence. And I find it such a defining moment for our generation to really rise to the challenge and to take our rightful place in history and lead that revolution. And it's very hard when you have to be part of the leadership in this revolution, especially in times of scarcity. Scarcity of resources, scarcity of young people in decision-making, scarcity of women in decision-making. It's a lot of scarcity. And you have to double down and say, even though it's a period of scarcity, your mind shouldn't be that of scarcity. It should be that of abundance, How do I reroute all these resources that are around us to ensure that they deliver the high impact that I believe is the purpose of my being in this role? So I find that other than just the scarcity of resources, of people, of young people, of women in decision-making, it's also that it's the 21st century. Yeah. You're living through everyone looking at you. You feel the eyes, you feel the hopes, and they're not that detached from you. So it's adversity in different levels.
Adversity in different levels. And of course, I think a number of salient points. One of, I think, is really important and should resonate with all the leaders in the room is this idea that leadership should not be just about myself, but leadership is for my village. It is for my community. It is for my country. It is for my continent. And I think you've positioned that really strongly for us. You speak about a second liberation or another wave of transformation. And this is the challenge that everybody in the room is faced with. What is your role in bringing about the different types of liberation and transformation that are required in your society? But leaders, don't forget this. The minister, when she heard the news, she checked her Twitter feed, and she took a selfie.
And I took a selfie.
Right? So this is the leadership we're talking about, deeply in the fourth industrial revolution. But let me come back, Mama, from the fourth industrial revolution. If you were now to look at, we know that Africa is not a homogeneous continent. We know that we have different markets, we have different realities. But surely there are some common golden threads of what leadership should look like on the continent. The leaders here are all leading in their respective spaces. Are there any individual or maybe even collective lessons that you would say, these are the top 3 things that I think as you contend with what adversity looks like now, you should not lose this as a leader? What are those 3 things that for you define leadership, irrespective of whether we're talking about the days when Mozambique had to be rebuilt, or we're talking about the days like 2018, where 200 young leaders find themselves here?
We are Africans, and as Africans, we have a philosophy which defines you as we and not I. And I think that is the fundamental identity which any young person who expects to lead has to define himself or herself always as we. What does it mean? It means that whether you are coming from a village, you are coming from a slum, you are coming from a public service, you are coming from an academic institution, you are coming from a corporate, you carry the aspirations of the community you represent. You are never yourself for yourself. You represent that community. So it's extremely important that we keep that fundamental African value of defining ourselves always in terms of who do we belong to, and when you climb with those people who you represent. That's the first. The second one is, the minister was talking about scarcity.
Yes.
I think actually African young leaders have to, as she quite rightly put it, the abundance. We are not a poor continent. We are not poor countries. We are really rich and rich and rich with the values which have carried us until where we are today, but with the ability of recreating our own way of being in the community of nations. If you take into account that this continent has been crushed, there was an intention to crush us as colonialists, but we emerged strong, and that's why we are where we are. And there's the second revolution or liberation where we are. I think the second point which I want to raise as next to we is redesign the table. Don't accept the tables which you are working on now, because they have not been designed by you. Most of institutions we are living in, whether it's a parliament or the way the government operates, etc., etc., we are imitating the models of what we inherited from colonial system. They are not African, embedded. They are not rooted in African values. So be bold. There's no limit at which you can redesign the systems, redesign the institutions, redesign even the value system, which is going to drive those institutions. That's the second thing. And if I can relate it to the past, those who are our ancestors in liberation, actually they had the courage to believe that from colonial to freedom, there's a new world you can build. And they did. In their own way, when they delivered freedom to us, yes, they began the redesigning. But you young people now, 21st century, with the knowledge, experience, and the bright minds you are, and the energy and the generosity which you have, just believe that it's your time to redesign systems, redesign institution, redesign the agenda of where we have to go. So that is the second element. But you asked me about the third.
Yes.
It's about ethics. It's about ethics. You know, you have to question yourself. How does it happen that we are with all this abundance, but we live with it without disturbing our consciousness that we have millions of people who are hungry. We have millions of people who have no food. We have millions of people who do not have, clean water. They have no sanitation. All those things which you know. The thing is, you are the generation which has to transform this. Nobody else. Really, it's your responsibility. It is your responsibility. And saying this, then it's the ethics I'm talking about is again going to what I was saying. It's not about yourself. You have to go beyond yourself. You have to go, to that level where you can say, I carry the dreams and aspirations and even, the ability of transformation of the people I represent. And because of that, you won't be able to steal from the people. You will not be able to forget. When we say, others are saying, leave no one behind, it means you will never forget where you come from. And you know that you take those people with you. You climb with them. And finally, you will say, this all, it's not about only economic prosperity. It's exactly about social justice. The end goal for us is where we are going to get every single African living in dignity, living in the ability to look into the eyes of each one and say, I am, because you are. And the social justice is the end. All the things we are doing are tools, are means, are mechanisms which we are using, transforming institutions, as I said. But at the end of the day, it's a social justice. And so you young people, you are not going to be beating women. Okay. I have to be very provocative here. Because I have seen some people who say they are leaders, etc., but they are oppressing their partners. And I've seen even young women, professional, competent, self-confident at work, but at home, yes, Baba. Yes, Baba. And they allow their partners to abuse them.
Yeah.
If I had the time, I would give you my experience on this. Okay, right. Sorry, I'm provoking you. Thank you.
I'm coming to you in a second. I promise you, I have only 2 questions. Then I'm opening it up, and we're going. But there are 3 fundamental questions you've challenged us with. Who do you belong to? As the first question. Whose table are you sitting at? As the second question. And what are your ethics? What is your why? Why are you there? And what are you doing? Thank you for those questions. Now, Prof, I want to come back to you because, again, we're focusing on this idea of adversity. You said something very important in your initial response. You spoke about social justice first as the anchor, as the purpose. So the question then becomes, how important is it how you frame your adversity? How important is it how you frame the challenges? How you choose to see the challenges as a way that gives you then the courage, the capacity, and the tools to actually work through them? Is framing as important as the fight itself?
Absolutely. Framing is important. I think we can learn something from one of the leaders of South Africa whose centenary we celebrate, Nelson Mandela, who went into prison. And whilst he was in prison, one of the things that kept him going was the poem Invictus. And I would say as a young person, as a young leader, if you can get a copy of the poem Invictus, get it. The second thing I would say, if you can get a copy of the book Who Moved My Cheese, that would be important.
Yeah.
All of these, they put you at the center of where you're going. And you frame adversity the way a captain frames the storms at sea. That the storms are part of the way of life, and you have a destination which is your purpose. You're trying to get where you need to go. The storms are going to be there, but if you howl at the storms, will they stop being storms? They're not going to stop being storms. In my case, for example, my storms were people calling me spy, and that had nothing to do with the work with me being a spy. It had to do with the fact that I was standing in the way of some people wanting to eat. Yeah. So I could then focus on really dealing with them about being spy, or I could decide I have a journey. The journey with the team is to anchor democracy, to support democracy, so that it can deliver the end. Umama was talking about a democracy that works for all, where no one is left behind and everyone is able to make the best of their own lives, and secondly, to be a resource to the rest of humanity. So yes, framing is everything.
Framing is everything.
Just linked to that, as part of that framing is everything, is you always have to ask yourself, when things are happening to you, am I a victim of this? Or is this just happening? And I'm certain that for all of us, when we walk through the journey of life, from high school, from primary school, things would have happened to us. And that book that I spoke about, which I gave to my team at the Park Protector South Africa from the very beginning, was a book about, do you want to react as a victim, which is something you said earlier, Mama, or do you want to respond, which is another thing you said, Minister. Do you want to respond as a leader? So the storms are going to come, but are you going to look at this as an obstacle that can be used as a building block to the future you have determined, which is, so that's how we framed things ourselves.
And I think that's absolutely important. So the framing is important, but how you position yourself relative to the adversity is important. Am I a victim? Am I a leader? And am I engaging with an opportunity to change the current circumstance and to change the reality? Now, Minister, I'm going to come to you with the final question before I come to the floor. What do you believe are some of the dated concepts and understandings of leadership that we need to let go of, that you have had to maybe even educate people around you, that you have to let go of this because it no longer serves us in the current environment? We're in, you said it yourself, you said 21st century. We are in a space and a time in history where we are seeing new industries developed. We're seeing leadership being redefined. Are there certain traditional understandings or concepts of leadership that you believe are not going to serve us? And as Africans, we might need to learn to let them go if we are really going to be able to lead in the current and in the future.
Thank you for that question. I would have put it more with a positive spin because I think there's a lot more we can learn from traditional aspects of leadership. And I think some of these misunderstandings are not part and parcel of the traditional parts of leadership. First, that young people can't lead because I mean, Mama Machel just said she was 29 when she became a minister. So where does this notion that young people can't lead come from? Where does it come from? First, that's the one that we have to let go of. And we can cite several cases of leaders who could be 100 today, who started leading when they were in their 20s. Yes. And the people who seemingly are peddling this misconception that young people can't lead started leading when they were young. Absolutely. Right? So we can cite so many of them. Even my own first president was in his late 30s. Lumumba was in his 20s, passed away 29. Kwame Nkrumah, early 40s. Every one of them was in that early stages, early years when they started to lead. So it's a misconception, and we just have to kill it. We have to shoot it down. It has no place in this society, and it honestly had no place in a society 50 years ago. So I don't know where that is coming from. And then second is that women can't lead. Yes. I have had someone say to me, even the Bible says so. Ooh. Someone said to me, one of the reasons why we are in we have such a challenged world is because women are in leadership roles where they are not supposed to be. Sure. And I think that is completely wrong because we can go back and find all the women that led revolutions, all the women that led empires. and they did much better than some men. And that's not to say that we all cannot lead, but it's to say that we actually also have our rightful place in leadership and our rightful place in history. And if someone just opened a book, they would find that actually we are in our rightful places. So that's the second one, that women can't lead. And then the other one is really, that bothers me, is again, it's a new concept that you put yourself before the people. Because going back, I mean, it has already been said, going back, you can read the founders of any country, they were putting the people first. And that is what traditionally leadership was. And we just have to go back to those founding principles of leading for the sake of the people, of leading for the upliftment of your communities, of your societies and the countries. And it's not about if your pockets are lined up first before you can ensure there's clean water in another village. So, and again, it takes me back because when people say African leadership is corrupt, I disagree with that wholeheartedly, because it's not a traditional form of leadership. It's something that we're seeing now. And if there's anything that we can go back into maybe 50, 60 years ago, then there are fundamentals that we can learn from. Instead of fundamentals that we say we should let go of. Right. And it is really remembering what it is or why it is that you are in that certain place. What is the purpose of your leadership? And it should definitely be servant leadership.
So purpose, but most importantly, we might need to go back in order for us to go forward.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to open up. I see the hands, right? I see all of them all coming up at once. So this is how we're going to do it. I'm going to ask you so I'm going to work my way up, and then we're going to take several rounds. I'm going to take 3 questions per round. And I'm going to ask you, please, sharp, short, concise, to the point, so I can get as many voices in as possible. And we're going to take several rounds. Please, can you indicate to me who you would like to answer your question? Do not ask a question where you'd like the entire panel to reflect on the question. It's going to take time. So choose one person, and if you don't choose, I'll choose one for you.
Yes.
And then we'll move it on from there. All right, so let's take the... Yes, Mama.
Can I ask them the lights are blinding us. We
to please
can't see.
introduce themselves.
We can't see people. We need to see the people we are talking to.
So dim the
and
lights
the lights
slightly.
really are too blinding for me to see.
There we go. All right.
And I definitely need to do this.
All right. Thank you so much, Mama. So we're going to go. We're going to
see
go
them
1.
better.
I'm going to go on either side. I'm going to go 1. I see you. 2, and I'll take you 3. Right? Let's take those 3, and we'll try again. So can I get the microphone here? Can I get another one ready to go for the lady here in the front, and then another one there in the middle? Short, sharp, to the point, and please introduce yourself and where you're from.
Okay, my name is Machel and I'm a journalist from Zambia. My question is directed to Professor Tudi. In your job, I know you had all these threats, but did you reach a point where you had to choose between personal security or your personal safety and national interest, especially that your job involved things that were exposing these big guys who are after money?
Thank you very much. So self-preservation versus national interest. Thank you so much. Let's take the question from you. Thank you.
My name is Zainab Katimba. I'm a member of parliament in Tanzania. I got voted into office when I was 25. Please, Honorable Bogolo, could you please share the disruptions that you've had to thrive through to reach where you are, so that you can inspire this flow of future, present and future leaders, the Obama leaders? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So emphasis on disruptions that you've had to thrive through. Let's take the question from here. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you. My name is Candace Nkot, and I'm from Cameroon, and I
here because I want to push women empowerment. Mrs. Machel, I wanted to ask you if you can tell us about the time you saw a woman shift from a mentality where she limited her aspiration to be able to fit in a society that pushes us to become a non-threatening wife to becoming someone with ambition, and what advice you will give to community influencers like us to help women to empower themselves emotionally and economically.
Thank you very much. That's a beautiful question, Candice. You guys have done really well with short and sharp. So I'm going to take 3 more, and then I'll come back to the panel. So let me go to the back. Let's go to the back. Yes, you're nodding. Yes, please. Yes, thank you. I see you too. All right. And then we're going to take the lady here with the striped shirt, and let's take a gentleman. Can we take the gentleman there in the gray jersey? Thank you very much. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Emily Miki, and I'm from Cameroon. My question is directed to Mama Machel. She has experience in promoting education in conflict regions, and presently in Cameroon for 2 years, our children have not been able to go to school for 2 years in the English-speaking regions, and there's a lot of killings. So how do you do with situations like that? If she could explain her model properly, because we have difficulties on the field promoting education when you're at risk of being killed.
Beautiful question. Looking for a model that can work. Thank you so much. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Mercy Odongo from Kenya. My question is to Mama Graca. How did you manage to marry 2 presidents from different countries and retain your identity, that is, you still maintain your leadership with grace and brilliance?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Final question, the guy in the... Yes, please, sir. Thank you. I see you. Guys, can we settle down so we can hear the question? You guys are not familiar with love. Let's go there.
Thank you very much. My name is Jeremy Lesuba.
Guys, can I please have your attention? Jeremy has a question. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jeremy Lesuba. I'm a member of Parliament for the Republic of Congo, in the Republic of Congo. My question, I apologize, but I would like to open this question to 2 of the panelists specifically.
You'll only get 1, so go ahead.
Okay, that's fine. I think it's an important question, though. Many countries on our continent have been torn apart by war. The societies have been torn apart by war. And much of the work that some of the panelists have done have been to repair that break. My question is, are there some things that you cannot come back from? And if there are, how do you deal with those?
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you. Great. We're going to wrap that round, and then we'll see how we do on time, but fantastic, fantastic questions. Mama Graca, you've got a lot of questions, so I'll come to you last as you continue to reflect. And maybe Minister Kenewendo, I'll come to you first. And the question from Zaina was really around, what are some of the things that you've, or disruptions that you've had to thrive through? Any thoughts on particularly disruptions, so the things that are almost inconvenient in the current reality, but that you've had to live through these moments?
So many. A lot of issues, and to start off with, just a lot of no's. As a young female in particular, you go through a lot of doors being shut in your face and a lot of no's, and sometimes the doors open, but open with expectation. And that I am very familiar with, and have had to learn that a firm no won't close the door for you if it was meant for you. And I've had to I run a mentorship program at home, and several years ago I had young people telling me that, no, but we can't say no because then I'm going to lose the job. And I said, if that job is for you, it will come regardless. And if it's not, even if you say yes, you will not find fulfillment in that role. You will be haunted by having said yes. So sexual harassment exists, And it does not matter what level you are in. Even when I was just joining eConsult as a consultant, I had to, fortunately, I had a great boss who I could bounce off ideas. And I told him, these people, when we went to the meeting, they wanted me to then see them afterwards. Or they asked me if I'm working on top of or under. They were insinuating a lot of sexual issues. And I had to really put my foot down. There was even a former minister, I put my foot down and I said to him, I did not come here to do you sexual favors. And I remember at the time he asked me, what kind of a le 14 are you? Baba Tsonkozwana will understand the le 14. What kind of a young girl, that's what they meant. What kind of a young girl are you that you are among us powerful men and you don't want to do sexual favors, right? And I told them, no, I am here on my own right and my own accord, and I know what I'm supposed to be doing here, and it is not the sexual favors. And I can say that from that point, one of them, I built a relationship with him, and he respected the fact that I said no so boldly. And I encourage I encourage young women to really say it boldly, because if you don't, then people assume that you are accepting. People assume that you're accepting. And then on issues that are more closer to your heart, and maybe you're an activist or you want to start your business, you will also get a lot of no's. And I'm aware of the time. You'll also get a lot of no's. But my advice is you start. You start with the little bit that you have. When I started the organization, we had nothing. And I used to say, once we start, people will catch up.
Yeah.
They will see the good work that you're doing, and they will catch up. And trust me, they have caught up, and in folds. And in folds. And it's one of the reasons why I'm a minister now, because I was not afraid to just keep going through all the challenges and through all the scarcity that I spoke of earlier. So, and then the last one, Nozipho, was when I became an MP and I was at the Pan-African Parliament, and I spoke very boldly against the report that was being given by the President of the Parliament at the time. And someone came to me and said, do you know what happens to leaders that are ahead of their time?
Sure.
When you look at history, she said, it was a she. She said to me, when you look at history and review all the bold leaders, those who spoke boldly against injustices, they disappeared. And I felt that was a threat.
Yeah.
It was.
I felt that was a threat. So I said to her, I asked her, are you threatening me? Because we need to be clear so I can also bring out my boxing gloves if necessary. And you will get threats as a young leader. You will get a lot of threats that you are misplaced, this is not your space, you need to keep quiet. But you shouldn't if you feel passionately about what you're speaking on. And I remain very resolute in the things that I joined the Parliament thinking I stand for, and I know that they are the ones that keep me deeply rooted to who I am and to my people, and I will not change regardless of the threats.
Wow. So Minister, two things as I link the final comment to Prof. Madonsela. I think there's an unspoken challenge in the room to say, as you talk about saying no, what are the young men in this room taking responsibility for to ensure that those things are not happening under their watch, right? So that is the one thing. But then to maybe link, this veiled threat to the question, one of the questions that was raised for Prof. Madonsela of personal safety or self-preservation versus national interest. How do you make that call?
Thank you. At the end, to the colleague from Zambia, I didn't get the first name. What's the name, sir? Paul. Paul, it was a challenge to balance the two, but I could never make a choice between the call of my office and my family, because of course my family always came first. My daughter here, Wenzile, is part of that. I had, of course, to negotiate space, though, in a way that makes sure that I do not necessarily put my family in a position of risk. I tried not to incur unnecessary risks. And part of trying not to incur unnecessary risks is the power of communication. You asked if I didn't end up with enemies. I never viewed anybody as my enemy. They may have viewed themselves as my enemy. But for me, I always reached out to anybody who had said something negative. If it was said that people were trying to kill me, if I didn't reach out to them, my brother reached out to some of them. And we designed a program as the Power Protector where we met with the public. At the end of that stakeholder consultations, we met with political parties, all of them. And the last group that we met with was the governing party. We would raise all of these issues around this is happening, there are suspicions that some of your people are trying to kill me, and they would say no. And in the end, the public became the protectors of the Power Protector. And for me, as a Power Protector, there was also one thing also that I learned was we started as wanting to protect the public. And I remember saying I would be, the Power Protector would be the tree under which people would come in. One of the things I learned, you said something about some of the beliefs that as you grow in a leadership role, you end up discarding. One of the things that I discarded, which really worked in my favor in terms of safety, was I discarded the idea that I was going to protect the public. The team and I found ourselves in the space where we found that actually the people have their own voices. They know the difference between right and wrong. They know the difference between just and unjust. Our role was to open dialogue between the people and government.
Yeah.
Because what happens is people know what's wrong, but when they try to talk to people in government, the gates are not open, or they're not being treated with respect, or they don't even know who to speak to. But the moment we opened those gates through events like this, and we brought government, people became part of the Power Protector family. And so they knew exactly what was happening. We never had to explain to them. When they were saying, for example, we were spies, we're protecting foreign interests, people knew because they'd been part of events like this to discuss how we work. They had seen how we provided an avenue for them to engage government, to hold government accountable, which the World Bank refers to as public accountability. So the lesson there is try never to crusade alone. Make sure that the very same people you serve become your peers. Because often when we're in public office, we see the people as the people we serve, they're out there, and whereas they can be our equals, they are our equals, they know what to do, and in the end, they protected us. I wanted to just say something very quickly on the one that Jeremy said. Yes. There are things in a war situation that you can't come back from. And I think, Jeremy, that's a very important thing for you as the emerging leaders of our continent. I do believe that there are things that maybe we can come back from, but it might take centuries to come back from. For example, resources. Resources are not infinite, they're finite. And during war, resources get stolen. If you have oil, it gets stolen to fund the war. Gold, if you have gold, it gets stolen to fund the war. You're never going to get it back. The environment gets degraded. you're never going to get the environment back on time. So those are things I think we may never come back from. But there are things, Jeremy, that we can come back from, but it's going to be difficult. One of those things is poisoned relationships.
Poisoned relationships.
Poisoned relationships. Corrupt leaders divide and rule. In Africa, when I was a student, we were studying how corrupt leaders would use ethnicity to divide and rule. They would use religion to divide and rule. And then you start seeing each other like that. Look what happened in Rwanda. People killed each other. It takes time to start seeing each other as humans again.
Yeah.
It takes time to embrace the humanity of each other. So don't go there. In South Africa, last year, when we were busy investigating an investigation called state capture, which we should be aware of as leaders because things may be given to you as Trojan horses.
Yeah.
You know the virus called Trojan horse? It's given to you as a gift, then it starts messing up your system. So state capture is like that. Somebody's going to find you, somebody's going to put you in a high position, then they're just going to control you. But in the end, they destroy everything that's good.
Yeah.
But talking about that, when we started the investigation in March last year, they unleashed a campaign to divide and rule. It was meant to be a dead cat. You know, the dead cat strategy where you throw a dead cat for everybody to forget what they were dealing with and then focus on the dead cat. That's what they did. So everyone then focused on the dead cat. The dead cat was, there's no problem in South Africa. The real problem is white monopoly capital. And in all of your countries, you do have problems of monopoly capital. But monopoly capital is a problem regardless of its color. But it's not the only problem you have. You can't say there's no corruption. You can't say there's no corporate greed that is not related to monopoly capital. So they started, but that caught because of social injustice, because people are hungry.
Yeah.
And sociologists say when people are hungry, they become angry.
Yeah.
In Zulu, we say, indlala ibanga ulaka, like hunger causes anger.
Yeah.
Then sociologists say a lot of our people, where we come from in this continent, are hangry, which is hungry and angry. But if then you are hungry and angry and somebody says the reason you're hungry, it's Nozipho, you're not going to overanalyze that.
Yeah.
And if you see she's dressed well, and she's dressed so well now, and you say, you're hungry, I mean, I've stolen the money. I've stolen the money through corruption, but I am saying I'm working for you. The reason you have no food is she is the culprit. You're going to go for her. So that's what happened in my country during the campaign on white monopoly capital. But even today, the relations between black and white are poisoned. Our relations were always poisoned under apartheid. So we were in the process of healing the divisions of the past, as many nations are. But if somebody is healing a wound and then somebody throws salt on it, the healing process is undermined. So I'm just saying, be careful when, for example, some of you are going to go into politics. The strategy that says divide and rule, or encourage people to be unlawful and be destructive, it's just going to come back and haunt us in the future.
Thank you very much, Prof. Yes. The leadership lessons are coming through thick and fast. Dead cats and Trojan horses have to be part of our language because it's part of the reality that leaders have to navigate. I'm coming to you, Mama, now, and I know that there are quite a number of questions. There was a beautiful question from Candace from Cameroon who spoke about how do you deal with partners that want to limit your aspirations, and how do you then position yourself as a non-threatening wife or non-threatening partner, which is closely related to Marcio's question around how do you retain your identity if you're a partner or a wife to somebody who is a leader at that level and of that caliber. And I do want us very much to address Emily's question because it's such a beautiful, direct question around what works of the model when we look at rebuilding entire nations and societies? Because her reality is, I come from a country where for the last 2 years, children have not been going to school. What can I take from your model that I can maybe tweak but implement in my own context? And I know you've been taking quite a number of notes as Prof and Minister were speaking, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to work your way through some of these issues.
I will try. I think it's not so easy. Let me be very quick on the issue of children who are not going to school in situations of conflict. My suggestion to you in Cameroon is, please ask Unicef. Do you have an office of Unicef in every country? Just ask them to take the responsibility of help, because they represent the UN family. That's why I'm saying it's a responsibility. That's why they are there. To help the country to redesign the circumstances in which, regardless of conflict, which has to be solved politically, the children don't pay the price because they are missing education. They can find a way. And if you find it extremely difficult to do that, I can also, if you like, I can suggest people who can help you to do that. Because it's a tricky issue. Yeah. We don't know how long the conflict is going to continue, and you don't want the children to miss out because of that. So there are alternatives. So while you are solving the political issue, children are really supported to continue with their education. The biggest question which was asked here is this issue of your own identity and how you related to the kind of partners you have. I would like you to take some of the examples which the minister was talking about, sexual harassment, and how she has, because it is related. The first thing is that as a young woman, you have really to define the boundaries of what you are to accept and what you are not to accept. And that will define also the way you choose your partner. Because it comes to that. It's not like you discover that your partner is abusive only. If you are very clear, you will know and you will sense who is the right person to partner with in life. And I think that has been the most difficult issue for young women. Because in one sense, they don't want to be too assertive as she is, because they will be threatening, and they try to compromise. And then at the same time, they want really to affirm and assert themselves with someone they didn't have the care and the courage then to say, he's not the right one, before they go very deep into the relationship. So they are caught up in this. I know it's not an easy issue, but I'm saying it comes always to the type of a partner you are going to choose to share your life with. And now I'll come to the question which was asked, how did I manage to marry two presidents? I didn't, no, honestly, I didn't marry any president. No, not at all. There's a huge confusion there. I married two extraordinary human beings in different times in history. You know, I married Machel at the age of 30, okay? And I married Madiba was 53. So there was a huge difference between the two experiences in life. They were all, they were both, my English now, they were both very different as human beings. But there was one fundamental quality which attracted me to them. They would respect me. It's just to respect me. And to accept me knowing that I'm not a perfect person. And that was also the condition for me to accept them. I knew they were not perfect people, and we just have to be able to accept one another and respect. It's absolutely fundamental. Now let me give you a response which Madiba one day, there was a journalist who tried to embarrass him. To say, Mr. President, how can you accept that your wife is Mozambican? She didn't change to become South African because she married you. So she is Mozambican. And even worse, she is Machel. She keeps the name of her first husband. She doesn't take your name as Mandela. How can you live with this? And he made himself even more comfortable. I was there. And he said, you know, I'm so grateful to her because she allows me to continue to be Nelson Mandela, and she allows me to continue to be South African. You hear? And it was brilliant, and it killed it all. And that is when a human being is absolutely self-confident with himself, that he doesn't feel threatened to say, why my wife now is not taking my name, and why, you see what I mean? So I know it's not easy, but please take the time to choose the kind of partner you want to share your life with. And if you love him so madly, but you understand that he has certain issues, put your issues at the table before you go too deep. Let him know exactly what are your boundaries. What is she saying? The no's. He has to know that there are A, B, C, D things he shouldn't expect you to be or to do. Huh? To be or to do. And when these rules are very clear, he also is going to tell you, because there are no two human beings who will be absolutely matching in everything. The relationship between two, it is really this acceptance in which, you know, he has weaknesses, she has weaknesses, but we meet each other, we respect each other, and actually we are prepared to grow together and changing together during the relationship. So you are talking to an old woman here. An old woman who had these experiences, so it sounds easy, but I know that it's not easy. And at the time of my first marriage, it was much difficult, actually, to put these rules and to implement them than when I married Madiba. Because we were already very mature when I married Madiba. We were very mature. So, I mean, well, I don't want to describe more. It's just to say we were mature. But when you are young, that kind of negotiations, it's much harder. Let me also tell you something. I was Minister of Education in a cabinet where my husband was the president. So it was very complicated, and we had to establish these rules very clear. Even in cabinet, there was a time, I remember very well, he was going too far in terms of the way he was trying, to instruct me as Minister of Education and my team to do things which I knew he was not very well informed, and we could make a wrong decision. So what I did is to say, Mr. President, I'm really sorry. Can I ask you to freeze this discussion? I would like to have a much more deep analysis of this with Your Excellency, with my team, and then the cabinet can come back to discuss this. And then when we went home, now I can tell you, I had to say, yeah, that is true. That is true. We went home and I had to tell him, you know what? You are the president, I am the minister. And there are decisions which, if are made wrong during the time I am minister, I'm going to bear the responsibility. It's not going to be the president. So that's the reason why I said, please receive me with my team to explain with your advisors so that we'll go back while you are fully briefed about the decision we're going to make. What does it mean? I was young, yes, but I had been brought up in a way my family really, and I think this is very important. My family had educated me to be very firm when I'm convinced, okay? When you are convinced of something, stand to your position until someone proves you that you are wrong. Before that, stand to it. And it helped. So when you are confronted with a difficult situation, we have to say, what it is which is my value system and my conviction are telling me and then you are going to negotiate whoever is the boss you have. And then whoever also is the partner you have. So it's a question also of how we build our own personalities. Right. And in my case, I was really very lucky. I was in a family which helped me to have a very strong kind of, I have to stop there.
So we have a light here that says that we've got less than 5 minutes left, right? And I still want our panelists just to give us our parting thoughts. So if I don't take that gentleman's question, I worry about my own safety, right? Because he has been jumping up and down. So we'll take a quick one from you, and the gentleman on the far end, you've been asking so much, and then can we have a lady there? Perfect. So, literally a sentence. Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Mark. I'm the youngest commissioner in Nigeria. I made it at 28, but was confirmed at 30. My question is to you, Honorable. You've done great work. But to drive change, to drive reform at our level, it's not just one person. I want to know how you, in your position, with your platform, how are you creating opportunities for young women, men, people in our generation to also get into government? Because
Mark, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Great question. Let's go to that side. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Josh Nasari, and I'm currently serving my second term as an MP in the Parliament of Tanzania. My quick question to Honorable Minister from Botswana. What do you think that some of us who have been lucky enough to get into this position at this age, what do you think we have to do so that we can have more young leaders into these positions in the future?
Thank you very much. Joshua, final question. Yes, madam, go ahead.
My name is Thuli from South Africa. I'm a scientist and social entrepreneur. My question is to Prof. Thuli. Do you think there'll come a time where we don't need political affiliation to become members of parliament and people in governance? And if yes, how?
Thank you, Thuli. All right, so please forgive me. I really want to take all the questions, but I will get thrown out. So I'm going to go to Minister first, and I think this works beautifully. Our timer says we've got 3 minutes left. So Minister, I'm going to ask you to, as you respond to these questions, to almost think of them as your final statement, and I'll work my way through. Okay. So let's start. So Mark from Nigeria wants to know, how do you open opportunities for others? But Josh in Tanzania is also similar question.
Yes.
How do we enable more young people and get them into the political arena?
Yeah. First, I just want us to get it right that leadership isn't just in government, and that when we create spaces for young people in leadership, it should be across the spectrum. It shouldn't just be focusing on the political side, because if we are all concentrated in the political side, then we are missing the balance. And what we are currently doing at home in the leadership spaces generally is, I have several boards that I'm currently filling, and I can assure you that I'm busy looking at young people's CVs to add a bit more life, but to also give opportunity to the experienced young people. And then we have I have a kitchen cabinet that the majority of them are young people. And it's not just for the purpose of myself as a minister, but is contributing to the work of the ministry and ensuring that, I am not getting lost in my own thoughts and thinking that that I have a monopoly of good ideas. And it's important for me to ensure that I become as inclusive as I want my work to be. And also, lastly, I do a lot of road trips around the country and trying to ensure that the decisions are inclusive, but also that the dissemination of information is inclusive. We are rerouting in the ministry. We're taking stock and looking at the footprint of the ministry and trying to change the offices so that they become more inclusive geographically. So in conclusion, my last words is that we are the now leaders. We are the now leaders. You may be doubting it, but I can assure you that this second wave of independence of the African revolution cannot happen without young minds. It cannot happen without young determination. And I ask you to be patient with yourselves, with whatever challenges it is that you may be going through. It is important for us as leaders to be patient with ourselves, with our processes, and to be patient in communication, as the Prof has adequately said, because it is in that patience that you keep reminding yourself of the purpose. And work with purpose is less stressful. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Kenewendo. Thank you very much. Prof, the question from Thuli, is there a future where we might see young people not needing political affiliation to be able to lead in the political space?
Certainly. Thank you for that question, Thuli, because it allows me to talk a little bit about the Tumor Foundation, or full title Thulisile Madonsela Foundation. But firstly, right now, anybody can lead at local government level without a title in South Africa. Because in local government, we have a two-pronged approach to public office. You can come in as a ward councillor, or you can come in through proportional representation, a group of names that would be submitted by your party. On the proportional representation, you must have a party. On the constituency, anybody in South Africa can stand for elections. And I'm glad that a scientist is considering the possibility of public office, because we often have left politics to older people and people who probably don't have an opportunity to have jobs elsewhere. Whereas if you look at... Sorry. Whereas if you look at the pioneer politicians that were mentioned by the minister, the Nkrumahs, we had the cream of the countries that went into politics, and we want you, the cream of the country, to go into politics again. So in local government, encourage anybody to go. In terms of where do you get your funding, because it costs money, you can do crowdfunding. And some young lady just got a post, just got elected in New York. Well, this is not this country, but a 26-year-old just got elected to represent the Democrats in the elections in New York. So that's going to be possible. But going to the future, Thuli, you've asked a wonderful question, because I always say one of the mistakes we're making in Africa is we're leaving philosophy to the Amilcar Cabrals, to the Fanons, and then to the global philosophers like Aristotle, Plato, etc. What has happened to our new philosophers? We have the power to come back to the political space and say, for democracy to work in our new environment, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and relatively ambiguous, we need to refine democracy so that it can meet the requirements of our time. And one of those refinements is a political party the only way to public office? It was not always through political parties. Some philosopher thought it was a good idea, and you have the power to give us ideas. The Tumor Foundation is a democracy, leadership, and literacy organization, and one of the things it does is to provide a platform for democracy dialogues and for democracy research, and we're inviting young people in particular, but women as well, and other people who are not in the mainstream, who are not fully represented in the mainstream, to come and work with us to look at democratic alternatives. But just lastly, to reinforce what you said, is we don't all have to lead inside government to change the course of history in terms of our continent. We can begin the leadership we have in civil society and then interface with government to help government to govern properly. Again, at the Tumor Foundation, we have a program called an Epoch Leadership Program, where our focus in terms of training is not people who are already in government, is those outside, so that they can engage meaningfully with government. Instead of banning things, engage meaningfully, and hopefully then enter government and become the leaders we've been waiting for. Epoch stands for ethical leaders, those who do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Purpose-driven, those who are focusing on the vision of what kind of society are you trying to create. Impact conscious. Remember, everything you say or do has implications for how people are going to act, and then committed to serve. So that's Epoch leadership. And another project you could be involved with is from Stellenbosch University. It's called an M Plan for Social Justice. Because we believe we can talk so much about politics. We can create opportunities in government, opportunities in entrepreneurship for young people. But as long as a lot of our people are left behind, democracy is under threat in our continent. And the M Plan for Social Justice is about leveraging community resources and helping government also with policies to create a movement for social justice to make sure that by 2030, nobody is poor and that structural inequality has been ended. It's a South African thing, but when I spoke to the African Leadership University MBA students in Rwanda recently, one student from Zimbabwe said he would like to implement an M Plan for social justice in Zimbabwe as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much, Prof. Now, as a way of closing, Mama, Prof, Minister, as you can see, the cameras around the room, there's media in the room, and at the end of this conversation, they're going to be looking for a headline that they're going to use to capture this conversation. So I'd like a headline to help my fellow colleagues in the room. Not an editorial, not an executive summary, not a front page story. What is the headline that they must take away from this conversation? Just the headline, right? And Mama, I'm going to let you go last because I think Minister might have a bit of an advantage, so I want to limit her time so that you have more time to think about it, right? Minister, your headline.
I actually think that you are the right person for that headline. Don't you agree that she should give us the headline?
Moderator superpowers, right? Moderator superpowers allows moderators to instruct ministers, which never happens, right? So as we wait, Minister, your headline.
Oh my God. You know, one of the challenges is being given the other side of the mind and not of the brain. The creativity one doesn't really exist. I think young leaders are not the futures of tomorrow, but they are the now leaders.
That's the headline. Minister, it can't be an
I don't know.
editorial.
I'm thinking, and
It can't be an
you put
editorial.
me on the spot. Or maybe that young leaders, these leaders, are the rightful leaders for the second wave of independence.
So we have 2 newspapers running this weekend, right? And that's fine. So the first headline, young leaders are not the future leaders, they are the now leaders, right? The second newspaper headline running this weekend is the right leaders for the second independence.
The young leaders, yeah, for the second
The
economic
right
independence.
young leaders
yeah.
for the second independence. Prof, this is a headline that's making its way all the way across the continent.
Right.
It's online publication. What is your headline?
My headline would be that you don't need a title to lead. And secondly, don't go it alone. The Ethiopians say, when spider webs combine, they can even tie up a lion.
Wow.
And the lion you must tie up is poverty and corruption. Thank you.
So there we have it. Headline number 3, you don't need a title to lead. Headline number 4, don't go it alone. Then you have a semicolon. When spider webs combine, they can even tie up a lion. Final headline. Final headline. Then we're done.
I must say I'm not good with headlines. And actually, I'm always very shy when it comes to media because I'm very, very shy. A profound transformation of the continent will be achieved when young leaders, networks, work together to build the wave of transformation. It has to be a wave. Now, it's not a headline. I have to explain this. It's because individually, as she said, you can't. And as a continent, you need really to connect and move as waves of transformation. Otherwise, we'll be here in the next 50 years. Yeah.
So there you have it. Young leaders are not future leaders, they're the now leaders. You are the right leaders for the second independence of this continent. None of you need a title to lead. Don't go it alone. When spider webs connect, they can tie together entire lines. And finally, a profound transformation of the continent will be achieved when leaders and their networks work together. Thank you for having us.